Hi, I'm Ranger Karen with the New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park. We're one of more than 400 parks that make up the National Park Service, but we're the only one that's dedicated to America's unique art form of jazz. Tonight, I'd like to welcome you to the golden hour. The golden hour is that time of day when the light is perfect and the music is too. Tonight's concert and conversation is going to be led by Nick Spitzer, the producer and host of the American Roots radio program. And we're going to be blessed with music by the Jason Marsalis Quintet. With that, I'll turn things over to Nick Spitzer.
Thanks, Ranger Karen. This is American Roots from New Orleans with the Jason Marsalis Quintet. Jason is the sixth son of Dolores and Ellis Marsalis Jr. Three of his siblings are jazz musicians: trumpeter Winton, saxophonist Branford, and trombonist Delfio. Jason is the timekeeper who played with his father and notable others: Joe Henderson, Lionel Hampton, and Marcus Roberts. Jason also had the courage to add to his role as a drummer to go to that place where percussion and melody are together, the vibraphone. Pianist, composer, teacher, and father Ellis Marsalis passed on April 1st, 2020. Jason Marsalis Quintet present his father's music. Yeah, Jason Marsalis Quintet. What was the tune there, Jason?
That was an original composition of my late father, Ellis Marsalis, entitled Oneness.
Yeah.
It was first recorded back in 1976 on an album entitled Solo Piano Reflections, and it actually hadn't been played since. So
Is that right?
yeah, this I'm definitely enjoying the music this evening because there's a lot of rare gems of my father that we're going to be playing tonight.
Well, you know, over the years, I've noticed you're kind of the family's archivist. You dig into what everybody's played, what they recorded. You deal with all their press, their history, and right now you're really going through your father's archives of maybe some of the less known things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, like there's in fact there's still sheet music that I have to go through. There's still some other things that I've got to go through. But,
and who we got here tonight? Because I know these gentlemen played on one of the recordings by his quintet.
Yes, we have on piano, former student from the New Orleans Center for Creative Arts, Mr. Shea Pierre. On the tenor and soprano saxophone, Derek Doge. On trumpet, Ashlyn Parker. And on the bass, Jason Stewart.
All right. It's a good-looking crew here, and the sun's going down. It looks beautiful at Esplanade Studios. And what's next in terms of some beautiful music to remember your father by?
Well, the next tune that we're going to do comes from an album that was recorded back in between 1981 and 1982. It was during the time when my eldest brother, Wynton, had first got signed to CBS Records. And so they did this album entitled Fathers and Sons. And side one had my father and Wynton and Branford on it. And side two had the Freemans from Chicago, Von Freeman and his son, Chico Freeman. It's a very hard to find album nowadays, but nonetheless, we're going to do a tune that was written by my father that appeared on that album. It's loosely based on the Herbie Hancock classic Dolphin Dance.
Oh,
and
lovely.
This is entitled A Joy Forever.
And nonetheless, if you can't get the record, you can hear the tune streamed right now in the Golden Hour. Joy forever. If you're just joining us, this is the Golden Hour on American Roots, coming to you from Esplanade Studios right here in New Orleans. Jason, I feel like I need to give you a moment to catch your breath. You're the kind of musician who's got to work it out because you're doing percussion. And I hate to ask you questions like running up next to a runner and saying, so can we talk about life a little bit, Jason?
Not a problem.
I noticed that. We were talking about your father a little bit before, and over the years we've talked. And I wondered, do you think of him as somebody that is a nostalgicist in any way? Because I always thought he was pretty hardcore about the facts and history. And there's so many song titles. We got one coming up called Nostalgic Impressions, and there's a lot of romantic titles in his list. But what's your sense of being close to the man, of his nostalgia or his just straight ahead qualities?
Yeah, well, he was really holistic, I think is the best way to put it. Like he's one that has a holistic view of the world and of people, and even with the music, he would look at it in terms of how it related to things going on around the world. I remember one statement he made to me years ago when we were having one of these discussions, and I remember him saying, "Well, yeah, man, when Louis Armstrong was making those records with the Hot Five, man, Henry Ford and them was cooking, And I was like, oh.
Timelines.
But he was talking about just in terms of the level of creativity that was going on, not just in the music, but also just in the auto industry and things going on across
in culture
America.
and history and commerce and society.
And so the way that he is that when it came to music, the history was very important, but he would also look forward and also keep up with current things that are going on, like even during the time of the 1970s, and even the 1960s. There was a lot of pop music of the time that he was aware of, and even of the 70s. And sometimes he and I would have these discussions. If there was a tune from the 70s that I might know, he might ask me, "Well, how is it that you heard that?" And I said, "Well, I heard it from the end." So there were a lot of those things that he was aware of. So the history was something that was very important, but he also moved forward as well.
How about you? What is it you best appreciate about your father's music?
I think for me it would be the variety and the different moods, and the fact that he never took melody for granted. Because that can happen nowadays, but that's another conversation. That's the thing.
We got some guys to help with melody here tonight.
Yeah, so that's the thing, and I think that he had such an understanding of music, just as a whole, and I can hear that even with how his playing evolved. Like if you hear a recording of him in the 1960s and then a recording of him in the 1990s, you hear all this music that has happened since that time in his playing.
That he's been hearing, and then he makes it his own, does his thing, and sounds. So set us up for Nostalgic Impressions.
Yeah, so this was a tune that he wrote in the 1970s for a band that he was leading that he called the Elm Music Company. And from what I understand, I think someone once asked him who had heard the band play live. I think they asked him, "Well, how is it that everything that you guys play is in thirds or is diatonic?" And he said, he had to think about it. And he realized a lot of tunes they had been playing were diatonic. They were doing even then, they were doing some popular tunes of the time that group would do. So he decided, well, let me write something a little bit outside the mold, sort of. So he came up with this tune. And little did he know that was a tune that would, influence music really for generations, especially his second son, Wynton. This tune had a big mark on a lot of his tunes.
All right.
And so this was a tune that was on the Fathers and Sons album and actually has been recorded a few other times. This is entitled Nostalgic Impressions.
folks listen all around the world to the Jason Marsalis Quintet right now. Cape Town, South Africa, Argentina, Mexico, New Jersey, Wilmington, Delaware, Evanston, Illinois, Roswell, Georgia, San Diego, Lexington, San Francisco, Denver, Baton Rouge, and all points in between. So that's nice. We're glad you're out there. You know, in this time where we're isolated, we're also together. And we don't see you, you see and hear us, and we appreciate that. And we're just going to keep on moving along with it. You got a tune called Futuristic, so I guess that's the opposite of nostalgic impressions. Maybe in that moment, I was thinking about jazz. I mean, we always talk about the tradition. We talk about Louis Armstrong and New Orleans and Jelly Roll and Bechet and just so many people. And on the other hand, there's a whole modern sound, contemporary sound. And I think people associate your father more with that contemporary sound. But he listened to it all, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when my father first started, he wasn't really into the traditional music. Not at first. I mean, he was into the music of, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie,
Bebop.
Clifford Brown, Miles, Sonny, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't really until I want to say maybe the late 1960s and early 1970s when he started to play traditional music. Really? And those we've had some interesting conversations about that because I did this. In fact, I did this one gig where I was playing vibes in this Benny Goodman quartet context, and the guys that I had were all of these veteran musicians from New Orleans who basically have played traditional music more than I have, honestly. And so he happened to be at the gig. So at the end of the gig, Dad was telling me, "Yeah, man, yeah, I know what it's like, man, to be at that point, man, and having to try to deal with trad music." I said, "Oh yeah," and I, it was like one of those connections. Both of us understood that because he went through that point where there was a language in the music that he didn't know. There were tunes that he didn't know, and so he came to appreciate that more just over time. And so by the time you get to like the 80s and 90s, and at that point he's like well versed in just about everything that's happening in the music and things that are about to happen in the music as well.
He's right on the cusp. But when he played with Al Hirt, I mean, what was he playing? R&B?
No.
What was the music?
No, that was more. I mean, they would have like some pop tunes, but it was more in the traditional vein, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it wasn't really like rhythm and blues. Like rhythm and blues, that would have been more like Fats Domino or something. But Al Hirt wasn't playing music like that. It was more towards the traditional vein. I wouldn't say like trad all the way, but it was more like those kind of tunes.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be an interesting adjustment to go to trad. Now, how about you? Did you grow up going to second lines and jazz funerals and all those? I mean, culturally, did you participate in that, or were you kind of away from all that?
You know what? I would say not a lot, but there were moments. For example, like I was a really big fan of the Dirty Dozen Brass Band.
Well,
and I loved what it was that they were doing.
Yeah.
And I remember, and sometimes I might play in a parade. I didn't do it a lot. I mean, you had those guys that would do that all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
I would just do it from time to time. And there was one time I remember coming home, and maybe my father got this record, but I came home and there was this album that was by the record player. I was like, "Oh, Rebirth Brass Band, feel like funking it up. Oh, okay, this looks like, let me check this out."
Your dad had that?
Yeah.
Look at that.
It wasn't mine.
Yeah, look at that. Well, you know which is yours.
Yeah, no, it wasn't mine, so I think he got it. Of course, what I didn't know was that album was going to be a big hit amongst people I went to school with. I didn't expect it. But it wasn't until I started to get together with Dr. Michael White, which was late in high school, early college, and we would get together.
The great clarinet player.
Yes.
Teaches over at Xavier, knows the jazz history like cold.
Yeah. And we would discuss the music and the drummers. And then after a while, he started to ask me to play with him, and I started to play gig. Then I started to do traditional music more, playing on the drums. So it was one of those things. I didn't do it a lot as a kid, but as I got older, I did it more and more.
I love that your dad had the album of Rebirth, was it?
Yeah, no, it was.
Yeah.
Feel like
how many times has a kid's dad hip him to new music?
Yeah, well, with him,
Not in my life for sure.
I don't really know, but I think it was sort of I think with all of us growing up, it was an interchange.
Yeah,
that's the thing. He'd have music and then we might have music that he hasn't heard. It was like an interchange. Yeah.
Well, let's come back to family affairs in a little bit. Tell us about Futuristic. Let's get there.
Yeah. So this is it's another tune from the 1970s, and this is also on the Fathers and Sons album, and we're going to play that one for you right now. This is Futuristic.
Jason Marsalis Quintet, part of a tribute to his father, Ellis Marsalis Jr. Futuristic is the tune. You know, I was hoping I could find Shay there across the way. Shay, can you hear me over there? Could you lean into your mic just a little bit?
Yep, I can hear you loud.
There you go. That's good. You know, I just had to ask you, what's it like to play Mr. Marsalis' part?
Oh, it's special every time, man. I feel like with Ellis, he's the pianist that I've had the deepest connection with, even from high school up until now. Like, the moment I heard him on the record, I immediately connected because he had everything there. And I remember coming up, I was one of those cats who really couldn't play fast, so I was just kind of forced to focus on melody. And that's what kind of drew me to Ellis, because it's like, you know, he can do all of that, but the melody was so strong.
Yeah.
And also, you know, I also had the chance to study with him in high school for a bit, and just to kind of speak to the kind of character he had.
Yeah.
I was paying for the lessons out of my pocket. Yeah. So once he actually found that out, he would let me come and study with him for free. So that's just one of the many stories, I'm sure, that people have of him. Yeah.
Well, we'll get to a few more stories. Jason, why don't you come back over to the vibes? I have to ask you, how does somebody who's playing drums, mainly percussion, turn to vibes? That is a tall mountain to climb, I think.
Oh, yeah, it is. And interestingly enough, it was actually my father's idea. Because it was in, when we came back to New Orleans, this was like 1989, and I was starting to study percussion.
That's who'd been up in Virginia for a while.
Yes, we were up in Virginia
Commonwealth
Richmond.
University.
Yes, he taught there for 3 years. And so we had come back, and I was starting to study percussion, like timpani and snare drum. And so he told me, well, you should get a set of vibes and start practicing that. And I thought about it, and I said, it's just not a bad idea, actually. And I started even getting ideas of what could be played. Now, I didn't practice them as much as I should have been, but it was some years later.
Everyone says that to themselves at some point.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But it was some years later that I decided, all right, let me really get serious about this instrument and doing gigs and so forth, and it was really terrible because I had no technique, but I just kept working on it. So it is a tall order, but it is percussion nonetheless.
Right. It's really where melody and percussion meet.
Yes, that is correct.
I mean, is there any instrument where they meet quite so tightly?
Not in that way. I mean, technically, piano is a percussion.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Though we have
the only other
strings
one,
and the keys and I got you.
But with something that's struck with a mallet. So,
yeah.
But with keyboard mallets, it's definitely a tall order, but it's worth it to expand one's musicianship.
All right. Well, maybe we should issue one more tall order and ask the gentleman with the horn section to come back to the bandstand. Oh, they're going to sit this out, aren't they?
Yes, that is correct.
Let me retake that. Sorry, gentlemen. I was going to engage in chin music, but we'll do that a little later on, maybe. All right. Yes. So what do we got here on the vibes you want to start off with?
This is a tune that my father wrote right before he did a recording session with saxophonist Eddie Harris. And he wrote it, and he almost didn't bring the tune to the session, but he decided against it. Let me just bring this anyway. And it ended up being the title selection of the album. So this is entitled Homecoming.
Homecoming, and you're going to be with Shea Pierre on piano.
Yes.
Duet with vibes and piano. Jason Marsalis.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Jason, just tell us about the vibes for a minute. Maybe you could give us a quick walking tour. I mean, they're just magical sounding. I mean, they sound like they're from outer space, and they're down home, and they're incredible. They really make you vibe.
Yes, that's one way to put it. Well, you have metal bars, and you also have a pedal, which gives the notes a sustain. So you can go from this to this. And there's also a vibrato, which changes the texture. Like.
Nice.
And you can even adjust the speed.
Whoa.
To where it's like real fast. Now, if you want to play like Lionel Hampton, then that's where like this kind of speed is appropriate.
Yeah, boogie woogie on the vibes.
Yeah, that kind of speed. Now, if like Milt Jackson, it was like a slower speed because he was trying to emulate like a gospel choir. So that is more like his was a little slower.
Yeah, I think it's going to stay magical no matter what you're doing, who you're playing. There's something about those vibes.
Yeah, and so dropping some ballads here, but also
if that's the least of your problems, man, that's very small. Let me allow me to get your man.
It's funny. There's a running joke amongst those who play this instrument, where the average person that sees this, if they see an instrument, the first thing they're going to ask you is that a xylophone? And you have to tell them, no, it is not.
See, I'm glad I didn't ask that question.
And you have to. And so the only way I can try to get them to relate, no, the vibraphone has this kind of sound. If you've ever heard the musical logo for the National Broadcasting Company, that's a vibraphone.
The old NBC.
Yeah, now if that's a little too old for you, maybe you've heard it, for the Final Jeopardy category, there's that as well. Maybe you've heard it there. But that's what a vibraphone sounds
I'm
like.
hearing an American Roots Public Radio Exchange audio logo in the future here. I can hear it right now.
Okay, yeah, it can happen.
With that said, what do we got? What's coming up here?
Well, now we're going to do a tune. It's a beautiful ballad from my fathers. This is entitled A Moment Alone. Okay. 2, 3, and...
the sustain on the vibes. A moment alone. Beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, just amazing. Thank you so much for that little duet there.
Absolutely.
You and Shay. The clock is ticking. Maybe we should get on to a little something about Milt, the groove for bags.
Yes.
Milt Jackson.
Yes, there was a period that my father, in like the last few years of Milt Jackson's life, actually did some duet gigs with Milt Jackson. I think
Of the Modern Jazz Quartet.
Yes, the Milt Jackson. And so I think they had same management, so he was asked, you want to play some gigs with Milt Jackson? He's like, yeah, you know, they would do some duet gigs and so forth. And one of the great things that did not happen, unfortunately, because Milt had passed on, my father once asked me, yeah, man, how'd you like to make a record with Milt Jackson? I was like, let's do it. But unfortunately, Milt passed on, so it didn't happen. But this was a thing that he wrote that was reminiscent of Milt Jackson and not only his playing, but his work with the Modern Jazz Quartet, because my father was really big into the Modern Jazz Quartet.
Oh, sure.
And so we're going to do a thing entitled A Groove for Bags.
It's a little play on the title, Bags Groove, I might add.
And a play on the tune, too.
Oh,
Bags
yeah.
Groove as well.
Got to play on the tune and the words.
Yep. So 2 choruses. 2.
Groove for Bags. I love it. Jason Marsalis there on the vibes with Shea Pierre on the piano. And let's get our gentlemen back to the bandstand for the full quintet. Upcoming, we've got Derek Doge on saxophones, moving to the center stage over there. And coming right around behind him, Ashlyn Parker on trumpet. And Jason Stewart back, picking up the stand-up bass. You know, I just have to ask you while the guys are getting set, is there any way you can say in just a few words, what was it like growing up in a household where 4 people are musicians. I know you've been asked that, and there could be a 1,000-page book about this, I suppose, if someone wanted to write it. But just your sense of it. You're the 6th son. You saw some of it happen, but you also got a lot of instruction from those who came before.
Well, here's the thing that I have to clear up every time.
Okay.
When I was growing up, there was actually 2 of us.
Oh, because the others had gone on.
Yep, that's right. See, I was born in 77, and so the following year, Branford left to go to college. And then the year after that, went to Juilliard, went to New York. And then a few years after that, Ellis III, he left to go to, he went to New York also.
And later
Delphio.
Baltimore. He's been a
yes,
photographer.
He's in Baltimore now.
And a documentarian.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Delphio, he went to Berkeley and Boston. So when I was coming along, by the time I was 6 years old, they were all out of the house. So it was just me and my oldest, Mboya.
And your mom and dad.
Yeah. So there was a lot of time I had with my father, obviously. And I would see my brothers on occasion. Now I did spend a lot more time with Delphio because there was a period where he was back in New Orleans.
And he lives in New Orleans now.
Yeah.
And the other guys are in, North Carolina and New York? And
so it's real spread out now.
Yeah.
It's really spread out now.
But still, the question is, how would you describe just the intimate family that you were with?
Well, I would say that I was a privileged musician. That's how I'd put it. Because
I can't argue with that.
Yeah, I had access to any music that I had wanted to check out, and it didn't matter what it was. And I was never told that I had to go in a certain direction or have to play a certain kind of music. It just wasn't about that. It was whatever. The main goal was whatever it is that you play it on a high level, whatever it was.
Well, we're privileged to have all of you guys here. The quintet is back in order. What do we got coming up?
This is a tune of my father's that, once again, this has not been played since probably the late 1970s, and there's no recording of it. So I guess it's sort of a world premiere for most people. And this is a thing entitled 3 in 1.
Someone just wrote us, said, this is an awesome tune. I have to agree with that.
Yes, first time it's been played in like a long while. In fact, one funny anecdote about this.
3 in 1 we're talking about.
Yeah, yes, 3 in 1. I was listening to this old reel-to-reel of a gig that my father did, and so there was a tune I didn't recognize, and so my father walks by and he says, "Oh yeah, 3 in 1." Yeah. And then after a while he says, "Yeah, it was kind of a corny tune." But you know, recently though I did find some sheet music for it, and decided there might be enough to make this work. Now I will admit there was one section in the sheet music that was corny. I will be honest and say I looked at it and I said, "No, we're not going to do that."
You mean you've offered critiques of your dad over the years?
But man, we all critique each other.
I've noticed every
We
time
all,
around your
believe me,
brothers.
I got some stories about that.
Yeah.
Some stories about records.
Yeah,
and
we didn't talk
cats
food
being
fights
critical of records, saying that this is sad and this wasn't happening. Believe me.
Hey, but that's what gives you all the creative edge to keep it moving, you know?
Well, we're just trying to play music on the highest level, and if someone does it, you're going to hear about it.
Oh, yeah. Hey, speaking of high level, could you, gentlemen in the horn section, get a little nearer the microphone? We have burning questions from people across the country for you, like, where did you get that hat?
Trumpetmafia.com. No, I'm just kidding.
Shameless.
That's good. That's good.
Shameless.
It's a Stetson. It's a Stetson. Yes.
Is it okay? So you can go to the Stetson
But then the
catalog.
teeth are from Australia, so you're gonna have to go to Texas and Australia to get the.
Okay,
get the
you have to
combo.
go to some big places far away maybe to go get it. And by the way, that's Ashland Parker speaking, who grew up in North Carolina. Just maybe for both of you, what is it like to play horns together on Ellis Marsalis' music? What are the things that make it different, special, unusual?
I would say
We got Derek Doge about to tell us.
the most unique and the funnest thing about playing together with Ashland and with Ellis was actually the focus of ours mostly on the gig was to try to make Ellis laugh.
He could be a bit stoic at times.
Sure, and not even just laugh, but try to make him interested in what we were doing. So we would take melodies that were plucked from a different song and fly them into the song that we were playing.
See if he's noticing.
and try to crack him up. That was the funnest thing that we could do on the gig.
Yeah. You're laughing along on that one, man.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was the name of the game, you know. But here's the thing: as clever as we ever thought we were doing and trying to crack him up, he always beat us at the game.
Yes.
You know,
He beat everybody.
And the stuff that he would quote we'd never heard before. I mean,
So does that give you deep sympathy for Jason growing up around his dad?
No. With Jason's skill set, he gets no sympathy from me.
Okay, well, let's move to the next generation then.
For sure.
All right. Now, back there on the bass, Jason Stewart. You've known Jason Marsalis a long time.
Yeah, and his father. I mean, I guess we probably met in the late 80s is when we met. And then, so we've been playing together ever since then, on and off in different configurations.
Right.
And then, the first gig I did with his father, I think, was 91. I was 19. Yeah.
And you were at NOCA, but he wasn't there then, New Orleans Center for Creative Arts.
No, the great Clyde Kerr Jr. was the teacher there.
Legend.
Ellis had left and gone to Virginia.
Before he
and
came
back, and he was at UNO. I think he was at UNO when I started at NOCA,
Right,
but
University of New
nevertheless,
Orleans.
he wasn't at NOCA anymore.
Yeah. So as a bass man, I mean, how does the music, challenge you, create what you're interested in, make
Well-
you crazy? What does it do for you to play this music?
All of the above. It's challenging, but it's also, his writing is very logical, and like sometimes some of the tunes that we've played and maybe that we're playing today, Jason, you kind of dug them out and rewrote them, but it's kind of interesting how Ellis's compositional style is immediately picked up and you're able to kind of complete it. You know what I mean? There's such a coherent logic to it.
Yeah. Well, and you three gentlemen, Jason was producing. You were on the quintet sessions. Ellis Marsalis plays Ellis Marsalis.
Yep. Yeah.
Kind of amazing.
I guess this was kind of the quintet for the last years of his life,
Yeah.
It was playing Ellis's music wasn't the hardest part of the gig because he actually had music and charts for that. The hardest part of his gig was all the other stuff that we did because we didn't have any music or we never talked about rehearsing or he never told me, hey, Derek, we're going to play these tunes on this gig. He would just start playing.
Occasionally there'd be a new member of the band and they'd be like, what are we going to play first, Mr. Marsalis? And he'd be like, I'll tell you when we get up there.
Hey, a little improvisation on the bandstand, huh?
Yeah, we never knew what was going to happen.
Oh, well, that keeps you on edge.
Yeah.
The funny thing is he was fearless in that same situation. If a singer comes to sit in, he's like, she wants to do a song. He hasn't played it in 45 years, but he's fearless. So
Let's go.
He liked the hot seat too. So,
Yep.
Well, we got one called "On Time." I think it's our last song of the night. The clock is ticking. What do we got here? Tell us a little about "On Time."
Yeah, actually, you know what? Since this one we're gonna do. This is a tune that my father actually wrote in '85 with. It was a quartet that he had with a drummer named Noel Kendrick, bassist Reginald Veal, and Victor Goins on saxophone. And this tune is interesting because it was very influenced by like the 1980s and that style of composition. And so it was a tune that was unfinished. And so I remembered recently like that he had wrote this tune, and I went through his sheet music and found it and decided, man, I need to finish this tune. This is a great one. So, and of course, "On Time" was an expression for being late. So I guess this tune is "On Time." So this is the one we're going to do for you now.
Jason Marsalis Quintet, Golden Hour, American Roots from New Orleans. on time, just about time to say goodnight. But we've got a little bit more time, and the first thing we want to do is bring up Ranger Karen to tell you who's been helping us make this happen.
Well, on behalf of the New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park and the National Park Service, I want to thank everyone who's tuned in from all around the world this evening. I want to encourage you to check out the Facebook page of the New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park, where you'll find lots more concerts by New Orleans musicians. And I really want to thank Nick Spitzer of American Roots and the Jason Marsalis Quintet for providing the music tonight. Thanks again, everybody, and I hope you'll keep tuning in to the Golden Hour.
All right. I got to admit, I'm a big fan of the Park Service. Used to hike around the parks. But look at this, a park that supports performance in a time of need, taking care of musicians here. And we hope everybody out there has a sense of the example of streaming with great quality like we have on the Golden Hour. And you get to hear some of these things a little bit later on American Roots, and we reproduce it all for radio. Jason and all, I just wanted to say that somebody wrote us and said, I fell in love listening to your father's music at Lou and Charlie's on Rampart Street circa 1975.
That's correct.
Yeah, that was before your time, I guess.
Yes, it was.
But I'm sure that a lot of people fell in love listening to Mr. Marsalis, and we've enjoyed it tonight. And we do have time for one more here at the beautiful Esplanade Studios on Esplanade Avenue here in New Orleans. Some have been asking what this old Presbyterian church is doing, being a recording studio. Well, this is what it's doing, the Golden Hour and American Roots. But tell us what you got in mind here to say goodnight.
Speaking of Lou and Charlie's, the band that my father led at the time was a group he called the Elm Music Company. And this is a tune that he actually wrote for that band. And fortunately, this is one of the things that was brought back and he was able to play in the last few years, and it appears on that Music of Ellis Marsalis Quintet album. This is entitled Dippy.
And Dippy, I won't say it sounds like the name. I will just say that this is old school New Orleans cool, circa 60s, 70s, and it's a sound we don't get to hear much, so it's a beautiful thing. Dippy with the Jason Marsalis Quintet.
1, 2.
Jason Marsalis Quintet playing Dippy, led there by Jason on drums and xylophone. Ashlyn Parker on trumpet. Derek Doge on saxophones. Jason Stewart on bass. And Shay Pierre on piano. Wow. I want you to join us next week for Layla McCalla with Creole banjo man Don Vappy and accordion and fiddle player Cedric Watson. This is American Roots with the Golden Hour. Thanks to the National Park Service, Elephant Quilt Productions, Esplanade Studios, and our American Roots team. And thousands of you listening all over the world. I forgot to say Armenia, Ohio, Michigan, Chicago, Bucks County, PA, Cambridge, St. Paul, Concord, Vancouver, Phoenix, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are. Bonsoir, buenas noches, guten Nacht. Good night from New Orleans.